Hello, folks. Welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA, retired detective with the Rochester, New York Police Department after serving 30 years. Sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, David Simpson, also a retired detective with the Rochester, New York Police Department after serving 22 plus years. Folks, if you want to learn more about what David and I did over the course of our careers, you could check out our bios at our YouTube channel, which is at Crime Dawg Podcast, or you could check out our website, thecrimedawgpodcast.com. While you're there, you could check out our cool merch store. Dave, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Happy to be here. Excited this morning.
Yeah, this is a good one, man. You know, we've recorded a bunch of podcasts over the last couple of weeks, but this is one, a case regarding New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who might be in some hot water, David.
Shocker.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. You came across X, or the twits, as I like to call it, a CFO, a fraud investigator. His name is Sam Antar, who will be joining the pod in a few minutes. But Sam came across some, what appears to be, David, illegalities regarding Tish James and some property, not only in New York City, but in Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic considering her office is the one that went after our current president. And also, you know, my background, I have a lot of background in real estate and commercial real estate, and just navigating the banks and the different mortgages and second mortgages. It's a game, and it's a dance to do things legally. And there's definitely some questions based on my professional background of being in that industry about how she pulled some of this off. So I'm interested to talk to him about that.
Yeah, ditto, brother, ditto. I have so many questions after watching. Sam has been on a bunch of different platforms. One recently, for those that know who Roger Stone is, he was on Roger Stone's podcast. But he's making the rounds, and we are very lucky enough to have him on our pod today. David, thanks for reaching out to him. But folks, without further ado, Sam Antar, welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast, my friend.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on.
Sam, before we get into Tish James and her potential and alleged illegalities, I want to just give a little bit of background on you. Sam, you were the former chief financial officer, CFO of Crazy Eddie's. For those that are old enough, like David and I are, we remember those commercials, which were really wild back in the day.
It's not the 4th of July. It's not Thanksgiving. It's not even Christmas. It's better than all those. It's Crazy Eddie Day. You'll save money like never before during Crazy Eddie's Crazy Eddie Day sale with the guaranteed lowest prices on anything and everything in home entertainment. Shop around, get the lowest sale prices you can find, then go to Crazy Eddie and he'll beat them. It's Crazy Eddie Day. Save big, big, big bucks during Crazy Eddie's Crazy Eddie Day sale. Crazy Eddie, his prices are insane. Thanks a lot.
Your family had owned Consumer Electronics. It was a chain throughout northeastern United States, started in 1971 in New York City. You were the CFO, and then eventually some things happened, and I want to get into that. First of all, I want to get into your family starts the electronics chain. You said they brought you on board, be the CFO of the company. You did some financial stuff for them. And then an interesting thing that you told me yesterday was the family sent you to college, paid for you to go to college, to kind of educate yourself on the line of legalities and illegalities of the finances in the big business world. Is that correct?
Correct. Crazy Eddie was a fraud from day one. It wasn't something that we fell into or accidentally did or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a premeditated fraud from day one. From the outset, it was income tax evasion and padding insurance claims. In other words, inflating insurance claims. I started when I was 14 years old. I was a geeky, kid, nerdy kid, whatever. And my cousin Eddie and his dad decided that they were going to put me through college to help them do more sophisticated crimes in the future as things came along. So I went to Brew College over here in New York City. I had straight A's in accounting. I passed the CPA exam with one of the highest marks in the country. And eventually, as Crazy A's grew, went from a private company to a public company. And, I committed all kinds of financial fraud.
Yeah, so that leads us to, and I may get the dates wrong, but the dates aren't important. The context is. So my notes here tell me that the U.S. District Court, Southern District of New York, they got you on some Securities and Exchange Commission's SEC violations. And according to the SEC complaint, you were basically deceived numerous investors out of close to $1 million of cash,
No,
whether that's right or wrong.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. All right. So much for the internets and the Googles. That's why I say this is what it says, allegedly. So hundreds of millions of dollars. So you and your family had defrauded everybody out of that money.
Yes. Correct.
And that's what, now, did you do any jail time for that?
Yeah, 6 months house arrest.
6 months house arrest. I gotcha. So your background into Crazy Eddies, you're a excellent A student, straight A student. You know the ins and outs. You know both sides. You know the education side of finances. You know the criminal side of finances. You get out. And one of the things that you talked about was the FBI agent that had arrested you. You had a tumultuous relationship with him at first, but you guys have remained friends to this day, and you've done some stuff for the U.S. government relative to your background in fraud, right?
That is correct, because I learned early on, never hate your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Fight unfair, fight fair, but never hate your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was strictly business. He had his job to do. I had my job to do. And we became, over the years, we became very friendly and friends over the years. Yeah.
So the cool part is that you, like many other people, David and I, our background, for those listeners that don't know, and for you, Sam, who don't know, David and I were credentialed investigators. Even though we were local detectives with the city of Rochester, New York Police Department, we were credentialed federal agents with the ATF on a task force that we were a part of, a multi-jurisdictional task force. And we obviously got a little behind the scenes look, being task force officers, relative to who the federal government employs after they arrest them. It's a pretty cool thing, utilizing computer programmers who were scammers. Now they work for the federal government because of their vast knowledge. You were one of those people, right? You went around teaching and...
I went around teaching and also sometimes assisting on cases.
Right.
Also, eventually I get hired by some of the same law firms that sued me when I was a criminal. And I started doing, I did all kinds of financial investigative work.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. So one of the things we talked about yesterday, and getting to the meat and potatoes of why you are on the Crime Dawg podcast. So you talked extensively on other podcasts that you're on that we did when we did our little research for the show, and things that we talked about yesterday. You had decided some time ago to start looking into some of the local politicians, specifically in and around New York City. And then you stumbled across Letitia James's case, who is our current New York State Attorney General.
That is correct. I've been examining the finances of the New York City government, the campaign financing of New York City candidates. I've been examining New York State's finances, the campaign finances of the various candidates also. And I've also been just looking at their personal financial disclosures.
Right. And now...
all from public information.
So New York State Attorney General Tish James, she obviously, just to set it up for our audience, for those that don't know, she sued current President Donald Trump prior to him getting reelected and accused him of inflating the valuation of his properties while obtaining mortgages and eventually getting hundreds of millions of dollars of judgments against him. I think it was up towards like $355 million, something like that. And as luck would have it, you uncovered, doing some of your investigations, that Tish James was doing almost or exactly the same thing, right, Sam?
Yes. Initially, I looked at, as it relates to her campaign spending, and I found a pattern of luxury spending. Now, that's campaign money, but still, it's kind of like, if you're going to use campaign money for personal benefit, that's actually income tax evasion, right, unless you disclose it. So I started looking at that, and things morphed into other areas, like our disclosures to the New York State ethics and to New York State, our personal financial disclosures.
And of course, there are, and just for our listening audience, and we have to legally say this, these are all allegations against Letitia James. These are all allegedlys. But Sam, the interesting thing that you have said on previous podcasts and previous interviews with local, state, and national media, you came across not only this information because it's public record, but it's actually numbers that Letitia James has reported to the federal government. Is that correct?
That is correct. Not to the federal, to the state government.
Okay.
Which he has to do is annually, as a person of elected office in New York, is file personal financial disclosures detailing aspects of her wealth and her income. And in this case specifically, the case involving a house in Newark.
Mm-hmm.
She purchased it for approximately $137,000, and immediately had a purchase money, a mortgage when she bought it of about $109,600. Now, she's since then, on her disclosures with New York State, she has been valuing the property. They allow you to use a range between $100,000 to $150,000. This becomes important as we get to the next step. So, in other words, this is her valuation that she places on her own property, $100,000 to $150,000 that she purchased for $137,000.
Now, was that Newark or was that Norfolk, Virginia? Was that
Norfolk, Virginia?
Okay.
Sorry, I've had the flu, so I'm a little bit off.
It's okay. It's okay. That was a Norfolk, Virginia property that you were referencing. In August of 2020, she made the purchase for $137,000, and then you're saying financing it with $109,600 with a mortgage through OVM Financial, and it was designated as a second home mortgage, correct?
That is correct. That's red flag number one.
Which means that she had intended to use it for personal use.
That is correct. However, the conflict comes into play when you look at her state financial filings and she lists it as an investment property. So that is red flag number one. Inconsistency number one.
Well, and let me interrupt just for 1 second, because this is where I in one time have owned a lot of apartment building. And one of the things that when I first got in the business or the game, was the difference between mortgage rates on a property you live in, your personal property, versus something you rent out, a commercial property. And that difference in interest rates can be a lot of money. So, and I was always, well, I want that rate. And they're like, you can't get that rate because you're not going to be staying there. You're going to be renting it out. So is this a situation where she looks like she misled the bank?
It's very possible. All I know is she says one thing to the state, and there's a document that contradicts it.
Okay.
The second thing also, talking about interest rates also, is income taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. A second home, you're limited to, I think, mortgage deduction and real estate taxes. But if it's an investment property, you can take all kinds of deductions.
Right.
Yes, you
maintain
can.
the property. So that is the second item relating to it. Now, so you have this house that she's valued at $100,000 to $150,000, right? That she paid $137,000 for it, and it has an existing mortgage of $109,000.
Okay.
This existing mortgage is nowhere to be found on her New York State personal financial filings. It just doesn't exist. So if you look at our New York State personal financial filings, she owns the house, but there's no mortgage on it. That is from 2020. I'm sorry, 2020 when she purchased the house, 2021, 2022, 2023. All four subsequent disclosures so far to date do not list that $109,000 mortgage.
Why do you think that is, Sam? What was she trying to allegedly evade?
I believe under New York's rules, you don't have to list it if it's a second home.
Okay.
But here clearly she lists the property as an investment property on her New York disclosures.
Right. Mortgage-wise, it was a second home.
Every way possible to her advantage.
Right.
That's my opinion of the matter. Now,
creative accounting.
well, it gets even more interesting as you go on.
Okay.
In 2023, she encumbers the property with 2 new mortgages. One in the range of $150,000 to $250,000 with Freedom Mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
The second one in the range of $100,000 to $150,000 to National Mortgage. So that she takes mortgages of approximately $250,000 to $400,000 on the property in 2003, on top of the $109,000 mortgage. So you have between $359,000, right, and $509,000 in mortgages on the property. Now, there's 2 issues here. The first issue is those 2 new mortgages cannot be found in the property reports because I ordered a title report on the property. So there's no lien on the property relating to these 2 new mortgages, which she says they're mortgages on the property. They don't appear. So you have a situation where one mortgage appears on the property report, but doesn't appear on her financial disclosures to New York State. And you have another situation where she has 2 other mortgages that do appear on a financial disclosures to New York State, but don't appear on the property, the title report. The last item is the biggest conflict of all is she states that the value, as we said earlier, of the property is between $100,000 to $150,000. The amount of mortgages she has on the property is between about $400,000 to $500,000. So you have mortgages 2.5 times the value of the property, and you have 2 mortgages that appear to be unrecorded.
The assessment of her house, the self-assessment, what she deems it to be worth, is one thing. Do we know what the bank assessment is, or the municipality and where the house is assesses it at?
It's not the assessments. The market valuation is not an exact science. Okay, you can look at the various websites that sell houses, Zillow, etc., and you can look at comparable sales in the area. At best, I can determine, and this is inexact. Okay, so it could be off, but still, even if it's off significantly, it still doesn't explain. It's about the best I can determine that the house is worth is between at most $200,000 at most. So if she says 100 to 150, she's probably valuing it accurately because I said at most.
So how do you explain a bank giving a mortgage of $400,000 on a $200,000 house? Like you've been. Well, is that between her and the bank, or does she have someone inside the bank, or do you have a guesstimation about how that works?
Unfortunately, I don't have subpoena power.
Right.
There has to be somebody armed with a subpoena.
Well, based on your experience in the business of creative financing, do you understand how she could have possibly pulled it off, or how you would have pulled it off, or could it be pulled off without some help?
I wouldn't have been this stupid. And seriously, I wouldn't have been this stupid to make it. It's kind of like, if I were to say, it's kind of like fraud hiding in plain sight.
This is what I have a question on, and I apologize for my ignorance, but I've had a couple different properties out of New York State and in New York State. But my question is, once you have a mortgage on a property, regardless of whether it is deemed a second residence or an investment property, you have a mortgage on that property. So these undisclosed mortgages totaling between $250,000 and $400,000. These second,
well, they are disclosed on our state filings. They're just not recorded on the property records.
Right, but my question is, these additional mortgages we're talking about the Norfolk property, right?
Yes.
So these additional mortgages through Freedom Mortgage and National Mortgage, how are these lenders giving her money on a property that she already has mortgages on?
and in excess of the value and not recording the mortgages.
Right.
Don't have a clue.
So
This is something like that violates all of the laws of physics.
Okay. So now all this is allegedly. We can't use that term allegedly. My question to you is there, my detective head now is going 100 miles an hour, right? So my detective head is telling me, I don't know how it could happen, but if I don't know how it could happen and you don't know how it could happen and you got the financial mind, is it a probability? Is it a possibility? Is it allegedly possible that somebody from these mortgage companies are in on this with her?
I don't know. It's possible. The problem is that you have built-in conflicts. She's saying the value of a property is at most $150,000, but she has approximately, let's say, $500,000 of mortgages on the property. That is a red flag. How does that happen? How does it happen that you have mortgages that are recorded but don't appear on our financial disclosures to New York State?
Right.
And you have mortgages on our financial disclosures to New York State that don't appear to be recorded. Those are straight facts. Now
Right.
she has to explain them. She hasn't explained them. She's
Right.
probably hoping it goes away.
Right. The second discrepancy, that was we talked about her Norfolk, Virginia property, again, allegedly. Now, the second alleged discrepancies are on a Brooklyn property, right, Sam? Where the valuations and all the things that went on with that property.
She owns a property in Brooklyn from around the year 2000.
Okay.
And she bought it, back then when real estate was a lot cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
At around 2021, she had valued the property, which is probably correct, around $2.25 to $2.5 million.
Okay.
The following year, she values the property at $3.25 to $3.5 million, about 100%. I'm sorry, a $1 million jump in the low valuation, a $1 million jump in the highest possible valuation.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a 40% increase. Now, in New York City, we have property taxes. You have property taxes in Rochester, I'm sure, too. And there's an assessed value. Now, the assessed value is not going to equal the market value of the property. That's what you would call the cornerstone to which you devise how much she's paying in real estate taxes. And pretty much, the assessed value is going to follow the market value of the property over time. In this case, she increased. Her stated market value of the property increased 40%, but in the same year, the assessed value of her property dropped around 7%. Now, the New York City government is worse than mafia collectors. I can assure you, they don't give ice in the winter. So it is very rare that property valuations drop. It happens, but it's very rare, and that is another red flag.
Sure. I mean, it happened probably, in the times that I can remember, maybe 2006 during the housing market crash. Maybe it happened back then, but I don't remember any towns or municipalities going, hey, by the way, especially where we live, going, yeah, the market's not there right now for your individual house, but you're still going to pay the taxes on the assessment that we had previously assessed you at. I never heard of that before. Now, the interesting thing, again, with this Brooklyn property, is there paperwork showing that she has 3 total mortgages on this property too?
Yes. Brooklyn is very, New York City's got a great system. It's called ACRIS.
Okay.
Where you can look up any mortgage on any property based upon the address, the block and lot number, or even the first and last name of the person. You look at the deed, mortgages, encumbrances on every property. And you can actually look at the mortgage documents themselves.
So my question to you is this. So I have had properties, both personal and investment properties, where the lending institution has sold the loan either right after closing or shortly after closing, like a year after closing. So what you're saying is, on these allegations against Letitia James, our current New York State Attorney General, is that she has multiple active mortgages on her Norfolk, Virginia property and her Brooklyn property in New York City. They're not like where one bought out the other one, and it just shows that there's three, but really there's only one primary. They got sold. You're saying that there's three active mortgages on each of these properties, basically.
Correct.
I don't get it, David.
Do you have any idea where the money that she's getting money? Do you have any idea where the money then goes?
Well, the New York personal financial disclosures are not as comprehensive as I would like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say to you is she's not showing any investments or anything like that in stocks and securities.
So on paper, it's not around. It's gone.
I have no idea what she did with the money. I have no idea. And when you compound it, and this is not exact. This is like the back of the envelope numbers.
Yes.
When you look at how much money she makes and what it costs to service the debt, I really don't know how she does it unless she lives very, very frugally.
These both properties were bought in what years?
Okay. The New York City property, the one in Brooklyn, was bought in the year 2000 approximately.
2000.
Right. When real estate was a lot cheaper.
Right.
Okay. That I can see where the real estate goes up in value, that's not a problem. The other one she bought in 2020 August, okay, where the value is relatively flat, but even if it went up, let's say by 50%, it still doesn't explain the amount of mortgages she has straddled on the property.
Right. Sam, in lieu of you being on multiple national podcasts, has anybody from, like, say, the GOP, the national GOP, the local GOP, reached out to you and say, hey, man, we want to hire you?
They really don't have to, because I put all the data out there. On my blog, I put I linked to all the sources. They really don't need me because I try to be transparent.
Yeah.
In coming to my numbers, I leave nothing really to opinion as far as it relates to those numbers.
Yeah, but what you're saying, you made a very good point earlier in the podcast. Subpoena power, there's definitely more to people's financials that they either don't have to disclose, or there's a lot more that you can get into, right? That you can dig into with subpoena powers.
That is correct.
I mean, someone from law enforcement should be taking what he set the table with and running with it. That's what should be going on. I just don't know if it's happening.
It's probably happening. I would guess it's happening. They're not going to announce it. They're probably doing their research. They're probably, they're probably saying, is Antar right here? Is Antar wrong here? These are normal parts of the investigatory process. My guess is that there's going to be subpoenas flying.
Just for the general public who, hears the stuff in the media related to what President Trump went through in New York City with his civil issues with Letitia James. Can you break it down in the simplest terms to people so they understand, is this almost the exact same thing as what she was suing him? He just had bigger numbers, or is this a little bit different? Can you kind of break it down in a comparison between the two of how hypocritical this could be?
Well, there's a lot of overlapping issues. Inconsistent. There's a lot of overlapping issues, but I haven't really followed the case that closely. I was, I'm more of a numbers guy, not, following legal cases, whatever.
Right.
But here is the case of the Trump thing. Okay. In any mortgage situation where you're trying to obtain a mortgage, okay, it's a negotiation. And the value that Trump put on the mortgage, right? The bank hires their own appraiser.
Right.
Okay. And the bank is responsible to do its own due diligence. So I could say a property is worth 100, but it can only be worth 10. Or vice versa. I could say the property is worth 10 where it's worth 100. The onus on the bank is still to do to do its own due diligence. In this case, the bank did. They were happy. They gave the mortgage. they were paid back, whatever.
Yeah.
Over here, it's a little bit different where her financial disclosures to New York State don't match the property reports. To me, that is a more serious issue because there's an inconsistency in what you are telling the government and an inconsistency to what's on the property records. That is a more serious issue, compounded upon the fact that she's the chief legal officer of the state of New York.
Right. Is her omitting or not putting that on the financial disclosure, or is that in and of itself a crime? And
I would guess yes. I'm not an attorney, but I can say to you, it's in of itself an inconsistency that needs to be explained and doesn't look, in the words of a kid from Brooklyn who grew up in Brooklyn, doesn't look too kosher to me.
Sam, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, and again, we can't stress enough. These are all alleged allegations against New York State Attorney General Letitia James. So go and check out Sam on his Twitter account and his other social media platforms. But folks, if you enjoyed this episode of the Crime Dawg podcast, we appreciate you. Click like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. If you can't get enough of David and I, iHeartRadio, yes, they have given us a live radio show every Saturday from noon to 1 p.m. We don't know why they did it, but check us out if you can't get enough of us every Saturday, noon to 1 on iHeartRadio. If you're in Rochester, New York, click that dial like it's 1970s style over to Wham 1180. That's the AM dial. Folks, thanks for listening to the Crime Dawg podcast. We hope that you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?